My name is Mike from Westminster, Massachusetts, and my UFO experience happened on a warm day in May of 2009. My wife and I had just returned from Mother's Day brunch. At the time, my wife was 7 months pregnant with our soon-to-be daughter. It had been a fun morning visiting with family, but my wife was tired and decided to lie down. I thought to myself, what a great opportunity to sit on my front porch, have a cold one, and listen to some music. And catch a few innings of the Boston Red Sox broadcast. As I sat down on my favorite porch chair, I noticed 3 objects in the distance above my city's downtown. At first, I thought they were balloons, but they were moving too erratically in a pattern like a zigzag. It was a mild day with no wind, so to move in such a pattern struck me as odd. At this time, toy drones had gained popularity, so I thought it was probably some kids testing out their new toys. Then I got a good look at one of the objects as it approached my location. It had ceased its erratic movement and was just hovering and slowly coming my way. It was shaped like a hockey puck and bronze in color. Then the color began to change to almost a gold, then brown, and bronze again. The oddest thing of all was it was changing shapes from a hockey puck to almost an oval shape. Picture an egg turned on its side. The second object was about 200 yards behind the first and began to approach in my general direction. The best way I can describe it would be a large black triangle sitting on a large black square. The triangle almost looked like a church steeple and had a red light at its highest point. The final object, which was at least 5 miles behind the first 2, was hard to make out other than being circular, black, and continuing its erratic movements. The air was mild, and there was no chance of heat distortion or haze causing some sort of aerial illusion. I was in a state of disbelief and curiosity, but at no point was I afraid. I grew up very close to an Air Force base and have seen every manner of aircraft, both commercial and military. They were too small to be planes, but too large to be drones. I wanted to run inside and grab my phone that was charging so I could record these objects, but was worried that as soon as I did, they would be gone. And just like that, they began to move in a westerly pattern towards the hills on the outskirts of my city. I ran over to the next street, just to get a glimpse of them disappearing behind a tree line. I don't tell many people about this story. I always kind of felt that whatever I saw was between myself and it. I consider myself to be a good Christian man who was rationally minded. I still can't figure out what I saw that day. Can you?
Howdy campers, welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad. A podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. We are your camp counselors, Woody Brown.
And Tyler Benz.
What's up, brother?
Hey, man. How's it going?
It's going very, very well, man. So first, I just want to say thank you to Mike for sending us that story. Man, we've been holding on to it for a while now, just like some of the other listeners who have sent in submissions. Fear not, because we have purposely, there's a purpose behind our...
a method behind the madness.
A method behind the madness.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew where you were going.
So thank you so much, Mike, for sending that. But I'm super stoked today, man, because one of the things that we love to talk about here at Camp Rad Strangeness, of course, are UFOs.
Oh, yeah. We've both been big fans, but as with most things, I have been a bigger fan for even longer than Woody. My friend Jesse and I used to be obsessed with UFOs. We actually had a UFO sighting on my birthday in the 4th grade.
Which, by the way, dude, we forgot last week because when we recorded last week's episode, I forgot that it was going to be released the day before your birthday. So listeners, join me together as we wish Tyler, who by the time you're listening to this has already had his birthday, but happy birthday.
Thank you, pal. Thank you.
He's a jolly good fellow.
I'm being virtually lifted up on the shoulders of our fans.
Oh, man.
I love it. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's 39.
Come on.
Is it tough? No, I'm actually 41.
Big time. It's a good number, dude.
I'm over the hill, over the precipice.
I mean, I can't wait until I get into my 40s. Being 35 is tough.
You've been in your
friend
40s
is 41.
since 99.
First off, I'm 41 right now. We're not getting into it. We're talking about aliens and UFOs today.
Yes.
Now, here's something that I don't know if you know this, dude. But did you know that Massachusetts, which, by the way, absolute miracle every time I spell that word that I spell it correctly. But did you know that Massachusetts is ranked like 17th out of all 50 states in terms of the highest amount of UFO sightings?
Wow. Is that like a MUFON report?
Well, I think it's, yeah. MUFON, and then like some,
which, by the way, for all you newbies out there, MUFON stands for Mutual UFO Network. And so it's sort of a database for if you have a sighting or an experience, you call in or email or get on the website MUFON and you record or fill out this little questionnaire. I've done it once, actually. And it's actually pretty cool because they literally send a field investigator that's in your area out to your house, and they take all these notes. It's really actually pretty amazing. So that's where these findings, I'm guessing, are coming from.
Yeah. It's an incredible resource, man. And if you've never heard of it, or if you have and you just haven't kind of dug deep in a while, dude, it's always fun to like look up your area or an area that you're going to this summer. You know, if you guys are planning a road trip, like we kind of, I guess, romanticized over the past couple of weeks in our episodes, take a look at where you're going. See what kind of, interesting UFO experiences have happened in those towns.
Actually, man, speaking of road trips, not to derail it, I am headed out to Yellowstone pretty soon in the next couple weeks. So pretty psyched about it. If you guys know of anything crazy or cool that I need to check out, my wife's like massive fan of like the national parks and has all this stuff planned, and some of them got derailed due to like the flooding and washed out a bunch of the roads and stuff. But I'm super psyched. It's going to be cool.
And I think a large majority of this stuff is kind of still open and stuff. So
yeah, it's like the North Loop is closed down, I think.
It'll be cool. And, potentially if this is the last time we hear from you, then we'll just end up diving deeper together, the listeners and I, on the missing 411 stuff. And
I was going to say, if I do disappear, I want you all to reach out to a man by the name of David Politis and get him on the case.
We're on it. Okay. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but just in case.
You never know.
Okay. So first off, man, let's talk about Mike's specific event here. One of the things that I found really kind of interesting, honestly, was that so often when you're hearing or reading about these UFO encounters, what time of day are they usually occurring?
Usually it's at night.
Nighttime, right?
Yeah.
And it's dark and
it's just
big bright lights and stuff.
sort of light phenomenon. Sorry to cut you off. It's usually just light phenomenon. You're not really seeing much of the actual thing.
Right. I mean, there are some, like, because it's so bright, I guess that's the common trope is just like there's this flood of light, and then that's when, like, the loss of time happens and yada, yada, yada. But with this one, it happened, like, kind of during the day, early evening, late afternoon. And I found that was the first kind of detail that stood out to me, apart from, him obviously being a Red Sox fan, which is fine. But so the fact that he kind of had this experience in the middle of the day was really kind of striking to me. And immediately, one of the first things that I did was look up, Westminster, Massachusetts UFO sightings, 2009, right? I didn't really see anything else. And so there's a lot of things, there's a lot that means. Number one, so often, just like Mike said in his story, he kind of kept the story to himself, really. He hasn't really shared it much. And so again, dude, thank you so much for sharing it with us and allowing us to share it with our listeners. I know it means the world to them. It certainly means the world to us. But so many people like yourself, Mike, I think are too timid to tell their story for fear that they're going to be, perceived as a crazy person or a lunatic or somebody that's just like, you believe in that stuff, And I think
it's really unfortunate because there's actually a pretty large percentage of people that have had, whether it's something as simple as just like a little sort of weird anomalous light in the sky that maybe had a different behavior as like a falling star, shooting star, whatever. Once you really start digging, you find that a lot of people have had similar experiences, but yet there's still that stigma that comes along with it, and it makes people hold off, and a lot of people just go to their graves with never telling anybody.
Yeah. Here's something that's kind of neat, man. According to statistics, now this is like compiled from the National UFO Reporting Center and MUFON, that almost 3/4 of all UFO sighting reports in the U.S. occur between 4 p.m. and midnight. Now, the peak being between 9 and 10 p.m. So what's interesting, and Mike didn't give us an exact time, but just it's either super rare, like that 1/4, just a quarter of the time of these sightings, he experienced something that's relatively rare, I'll say, in terms of the timing. And I just found it super fascinating when he was describing, the way that the craft was, seemingly changing colors and shapes, and there was more than one, and then, it was gone. And I just thought it was super, super fascinating. And like I said, one of the first things that I did was, well, let me see if there's anything else that's happening in Westminster. So what I found were a couple of things. Now, in future or other episodes, I'll say there are some pretty, I'll say relatively popular and or famous UFO encounters / abductions that have occurred in Massachusetts. I'm not going to kind of go into those. I initially was until I found these pretty interesting sightings that happened in Westminster. So the first one happened in 1950.
Man, I love it. I love it already. Those old ones they just do it for me.
It was the fall of 1950. And just like Mike, it actually occurred, well, it didn't occur late at night. Okay, so this is another sort of somewhat rarish one. And it happened in the fall of 1950. 13-year-old Betty Aho had left the house to play when she saw an object like a moon grow larger.
Whoa.
She was then unable to move. She suddenly found herself inside a white room, feeling extremely relaxed. Then 3 small beings glided toward her. The beings were humanoid, 2.5 to 3 feet tall, with gray skin, large oval-shaped heads, and huge black oval-shaped eyes.
Wow. What?
Yeah. They wore silvery white coveralls, which seemed to blend with the mist and the bright light in the room. They reassured her, and one raised his hand, and she felt sleepy. She floated with the beings into a cold, misty room where she was suspended in midair over a box-like table. The beings placed globes of light by her head and feet, and then beams of light closed in a square around her. The beings escorted her to a dark room where 2 more beings met her. They were about 5 feet tall and wore gray coveralls. She was greeted by name and told she was going to take a ride. Dude, is this not insane, man?
Jeez.
Okay.
Yeah.
They laid her on a large round cushion and fitted a mouthpiece device around her tongue. A being relieved her discomfort by laying a hand on her forehead. She began spinning and felt acceleration. A mist fell on her and lights flashed through a glass dome above her. This is so weird, man. Her craft crashed into a body of water and came out. She saw a great tunnel, apparently made of ice, where crystals held a collection of humans dressed in various ethnic and historical costumes, much like a museum.
Hollow Earth, bro.
Oh my gosh, dude. She left the craft and entered a dark, misty region filled with objects resembling UFOs. A taller being then escorted her through a subterranean conduit as she approached her destination, which was this great door in a glass wall where she was to meet, quote, the one. She then had this out-of-body experience and entered through this door. The events inside this room remained a secret. Soon, a tall human with white hair and dressed in white, luminous robes directed her to another clamshell transport. When she emerged, a tall humanoid being escorted her to a mine tunnel where several small beings cut blue stones from a wall. She re-entered a craft, and a being had her operate this console, where she then floated onto a table. The beings then apparently removed her right eye and implanted a tiny device deep within her head. She was then extensively examined and scanned. Following other procedures, she was promised that she could go home. Her next memory was of being on a field near her home, near a landed craft that was shaped like a sphere of reflective metal and was standing on 3 legs. Beams of solid light were coming from the top and stopped as if chopped off. A door and a sunburst emblem were also visible. She crossed the field with a taller being in front and 2 smaller beings behind that were carrying these luminous globes. The taller being told her that they were watching over her and that she had to forget this experience. So that was 1950, dude.
Okay, so I gotta get right in on this. So to you, what's funny is me sort of being into this stuff for so long.
Mm-hmm.
The first sort of definitive, abduction story, if you will, is the Betty and Barney Hill case, which happened in 1961 in New Hampshire. An interracial couple, yada yada yada. They went through hypnosis. You can find the audio of Barney going through the hypnosis and the regression, and it is so terrifying. It is.
I'm pretty sure we talked about it on the show last year.
I think we briefly did. It's definitely an episode that it's definitely either a 1 or 2 episode topic, because it's a very pivotal kind of part in UFO lore. But the thing that blew my mind is, number 1, I've never heard about this. Number 2, this was 10 years before the Betty and Barney Hill case, and she's describing basically grays.
Yeah.
Yep. Which I didn't think came really until much, much later. I mean, obviously Willie Strieber with Communion and all, but the grays and even the idea that 4 people that have had these abduction cases where, they see these gray aliens. And when we say grays, we mean, big giant heads, really short little guys, big black eyes, almond shaped, usually no ears, maybe 2 dots or 2 little holes for nostrils, very small mouths. That's kind of taken over, sort of the abduction scenario. That's what people see nowadays. It used to be, and we always go down this rabbit hole. It used to be fairy abductions, and then it sort of leads into the grays. And we're still in an era where people are seeing the grays.
Mm-hmm.
And
well,
so
even before that, dude, in history, coming back to Jacques Vallée's Passport to Begonia,
yep.
There's, like you said, there's the fairy abduction stuff. And then before that was people, heavenly beings.
Yeah,
almost.
the space
people
brothers.
in white. And then
that.
people coming down. I think it was I want to say 1400s or something, where there was this description of this craft that was in the air, full of like beautiful blonde women, came down, took the men, would leave. Sometimes they would come back with the men. Sometimes they never would. You know, the idea being that maybe they were using them for like breeding purposes.
Right.
I mean, you just hear about all kinds of just super rad stuff like that. Man.
Well, the thing that struck me is the fact that she's talking. So one of the sort of common tropes of the gray abductions are there's always like a taller one that's kind of like the leader, and then the smaller ones, which are sort of like the worker bees. I cannot believe I've never heard of this case, because she's literally describing the same thing that like people in the 70s, 80s, 90s were talking about. Because if you look at it, like I said, like the Betty and Barney Hill case was a really big deal, and that was the first big sort of, the big sort of abduction case where you got a lot more details than all the others. But the Grays going that far back is like blew my mind. I didn't know that went back there. Because the thing is like back then, 40s, 50s, I mean, 1947 was like the Roswell crash. You had the idea of like the Grays, but to have, not the idea, you had some of the like details that would maybe point to Grays, but as far as like an abduction scenario, like to me, this is the only one that I can think of.
Yeah.
And
I'll put up the source in our podcast notes, in the show notes.
Now, when there was a detail that I didn't totally understand. So when you said, I mean, there's a lot of like, she went in here and then got out and then got in this thing and then went out and then like
it was kind of like I don't know,
like a subterranean. I mean,
it seems like maybe they transported her to like a specific location, and there was a bunch of different like things or crafts that she had to get in and do to end up at that door or whatever. We'll call it she didn't say this, but we'll call it a portal. Because she described this out-of-body experience and then, like, doesn't remember what happened in that room.
And she talks about, like, a starburst emblem or something?
Yeah.
Well, then it also says something about a craft. This is what I was going to ask about. That had, like, 3 legs?
Yeah, so whenever she re-entered this craft, coming back home, being dropped off in this field, it had, like, 3 legs that it landed on. And then there were, like, beams of light that, like, you're looking at a normal beam of light, and eventually just kind of like fades to darkness, right? Just based on, I don't know, how many the lumen strength or whatever, right?
You're saying it sort of gradiates out.
Yeah, usually gradiates.
Diffuses.
It diffuses, correct.
Yeah.
And you can't until it's not lighting up that area of the sky. Well, this was different. The way she described it, it'd be like these beams of light that just hard stop, like hard cut off, boom, up in the air.
I mean, is that like tractor beams?
Dude, I don't know, man. It's just, and then like she described like, she was going to meet, quote, the one.
Yeah. And see, I wonder if that was, again, that kind of leads back to that, your like taller gray alien, which a lot of times like that would be like not always, but the quote unquote like female one would be like the tall one. And then the smaller sort of, like worker class would be the ones who would like, strap them in or hook machines up to them. I also think that it was really interesting, especially again, like 1951, the idea that, or 1950, sorry, that they took her right eye out and put like an implant. Like the idea of like implants back in 1950. I mean, that was something that I'm sure wasn't a common, sci-fi trope or something you would see in movies or whatever at the time. I always, we both like to do this. We always like to look at, try to look at these things through the lens of an everyday person living in the 50s. So it's like, they could have got this idea from, this book or this movie that was out at the time. But man, it's really interesting because like what he was saying, it's like, we go from space brothers to celestial beings we go from fairy abductions, celestial beings to like these space brothers that, they look like Greek or Italian and they have like basically wetsuits on.
Hey, what's going on, Earthlings?
sort of like an Indrid Cold type situation. But again,
They're only wearing like Gucci and Armani like wetsuits. What do you think?
They got a lot of like gold chains.
Yeah, dude. Just like they're in these like wetsuits, but their shoes look freaking magnificent.
Yeah, and they're very low V's, so it's like a lot of chest hair.
Oh, that's amazing.
But no, like just this idea, number one, of the Greys. Number two, she's already talking about implants. Mm-hmm. I mean, man, it's just so ahead of its time.
Well, I mean, for sure. And
you got me on this one.
But yeah, so that happened 59 years before Mike saw anything in Westminster. But I got something else that's going to be real short here. Something else in Westminster, man. Wow. Essentially, this is just like MUFON or whatever. That other one, same thing. It had like this long sort of description. It's like date, fall, 1950. Day/night, morning, location, number of entities, 5.
I actually really
humanoid.
That's like the MUFON journal.
Yeah.
Like
entity description, 2.5 to 3 feet tall, gray skin, large oval-shaped heads, huge black oval-shaped eyes.
What year is this?
White coveralls, 1950. I mean, just Hynek classification, CE4, close encounter 4, abduction of the witness or another direct contact.
And you know what that means, the Hynek thing, right? That's J. Allen Hynek, the head of Project Blue Book.
Yep.
He's the guy who came up with ball lightning and swamp gas and then basically sent out by the government to debunk this stuff. But in reality, after he did it for so long, he started realizing, like, wait a minute, I can't come up with these silly excuses anymore. There is actually a legitimate there's something going on.
Dude, it's just like that movie that we talked about a couple weeks ago where that lady is going to debunk these people that are doing like seances and stuff. And then in the interim ends up landing in the middle of this like supernatural experience, which is kind of cool. All right, this actually happened 5 years after Mike's sighting in Westminster. Okay, listen to this. So this happened Wednesday, September 3rd, 2014. The shape, cylinder. Duration, undisclosed. Source, MUFON. Okay, here's what it says. Here's what the report is. I was driving northwest along Route 2A outside of Westminster, Massachusetts. I saw what I thought was a small, bright object emerge from a cloud. On first glance, I thought I was looking at an aircraft. It was small and bright and appeared to have a condensation trail. However, as the object moved, the part that I thought was the condensation trail moved with it, remaining consistent in size and shape and moving in tandem. For a split second, the whole object glowed as brightly as the one end, then returned to its original configuration. It made me think of a transparent flashlight, except that the end giving off light did not produce a beam. My overall impression as regards to size and distance was that the object was quite distant and definitely larger than a school bus. And that's it.
Wow.
The reason I dove into that, dude, is I had this, I don't know, it's like I had this thought, this idea, as I was kind of thinking about Mike's story and just letting my mind sort of just like, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to look up? This fascination, I have this fascination with the possibility of maybe specific locations being of interest to visitors. I'll just call them visitors. You know, who knows if they're alien from another dimension, from another time, the heaven. Maybe they're from, celestial or whatever. Why are they going here? And do things happen at the same place at different times? Man, I don't know, dude. I mean, what are your thoughts on that sort of concept? I mean, I bet when you look at like a UFO map, like if this one site kind of has, almost based on like where you type in, it'll just have like little icons of UFO reports. And if I'm just looking at Massachusetts, for example, dude, it's just peppered with it, right? And so if you did that for the whole U.S., you would just see it peppered throughout.
Right.
It's just interesting to me, I guess, that there could be some reason why either these things are being seen a lot in a certain area, or I guess maybe a higher concentration of sightings and stuff.
Yeah, so a couple things. I think John Keel, who's Mothman Prophecies, the guy that would write that and go on to be a hero in this field, He would refer to those as window areas where, like you said before, almost like a portal. If we're looking at these things as interdimensional or, even literally like inner Earth, it's like these little hot spots. We talked last week about, what was it called? The triangle?
Yeah, the Michigan Triangle.
Yeah, the Michigan Triangle. It's similar to like it's like the Bridgewater Triangle. It's these little areas that have just this like heightened activity going on. And what's interesting too is I bet if you really, I'm not super familiar with Massachusetts, but as far as like the paranormal and stuff, but I guarantee that if you really break it down and you really start cross-referencing the amount of, UFO sightings or Bigfoot sightings, I guarantee there's like correlation between the two. And usually it's those hot spots that are producing all kinds of bizarre phenomena.
One thing that I was going to say is like, man, Massachusetts is definitely a place that we're going to dive in deeper. I mean, gosh, we haven't even begun to talk about some of the paranormal stuff that happens, in and around like Salem and
for sure,
all these kind of things, man. Oh, and like that section of the country is another place that like is just fascinating. Again, it comes back to us being down here in the South. A lot of this stuff, buildings even, aside from like Savannah and like maybe Charleston and that kind of stuff, are just like new. Massachusetts and all these places, they were some of the first places that settlers went to.
Yeah, right.
And so like there's all kinds of old, stuff just in those cities, man. Some really rad strangeness stuff is just begging for us to be it's rife.
There it is. Or ripe.
Just come on, man.
Whatever. No, absolutely. But with like those window areas, it's interesting because, and actually I'm going to bring up something that I had this thought the other day. And I think you and I talked about it, but I don't think I've talked about it on the show. But I had this idea that, so say we're looking at these window areas or portals, and again, if you're not a real true believer on this stuff, if you're kind of on the fence,
that's okay.
Just go with us. Just go with us on this.
That's okay. Just enjoy the ride. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We're just talking about it for fun.
Yeah,
you're talking about a bunch of Italians that comes down from an aircraft with wetsuits on. You're like, hey, man, there's no ocean around here. They said, hey, take it easy.
Throw down the anchor. Anyway, so just suspend your disbelief for a minute. Okay, so say that these window areas or portals or whatever are a legitimate thing. Well, then we look at, why is this?
Okay.
A lot of people believe, we've talked, when we were talking about the Coral Castle episode.
Season 2, Episode 23, The Coral Castle.
We talked about ley lines or these little spots of like earth energy and how these sort of lines sort of intersect and go across the globe. And a lot of these lines are like, you'll have Stonehenge, but then like all the way across the globe, like, Chichen Itza and, these massive sort of holy structures in like Peru, they all sort of line up and like the 33rd parallel and all this kind of stuff. I had this thought the other day of, let's go way back. Let's go back to those early civilizations.
Okay.
It's like, how did these people, how did they know? How were they sensitive enough to know, we need to build Stonehenge here because it has the most sort of, quote unquote energy, or it's perfectly aligned and all this stuff. Or like, a holy temple that would be in like, South America or and it's this idea that those would be the people that would be, your shamans or your priest, if you will, where they would, feel these locations. They would know like where to go.
It's almost like not to turn it into like a Star Wars episode, but it's almost like they're like quote unquote force sensitive or like sensitive to that spiritual energy or of any energy. Man, I like that idea because folks, we're talking about a time when, again, you can't just send a text message or look at an Instagram picture of where they put this temple and, I'll do the calculations and place ours. It's on the other side of the world.
Right.
In line with this.
Right.
We're talking about stuff that is definitely a mystery. Now, folks like us like to think about, well, maybe it's paranormal. Maybe it's like, hey, dude, maybe it's some sort of heavenly energy that just, I mean, there's all kinds of influence. And that's sort of like our quest, right, is to think about that stuff together with you guys and gals, the listeners and campers here at Camp Rad Strangeness. Now, I've got another theory about these windows.
Well, hold on. Before we go into that.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
This is Amy Poehler. My new movie, Disney and Pixar's Inside Out 2, is coming to theaters June 14th, and it's making me feel joy and sadness and anger, definitely some disgust, Rose, and I think a little fear. Really? But I'm also feeling these new emotions like anxiety, embarrassment, envy, and ennui.
It's what you call the boredom.
Okay, that one was weird. It's going to be the feel everything movie of the summer. Disney and Pixar's Inside Out 2, only in theaters June 14th. Get tickets now.
America's future can be determined by our dreams and our visions.
It was very intense, bright light.
For over 200 years, there have been reports of giant man-like creatures.
From another dimension, another world, I don't know.
The most intriguing mystery on the North American continent.
Hey, this is Bryce Johnson from the Bigfoot Collectors Club, and you're listening to Tyler and Woody on That Would Be Rad, because that is rad.
So well, I wasn't even finished.
It's cool, man.
No, the reason I brought that up is I was saying, I was listening to a podcast and it was talking about how there's people now that are highly, highly sensitive and affected by like Wi-Fi or radio signals. And so much so that like, some of these people, it makes them tremendously sick. Like it's almost basically like radiation poisoning. So much so that some of these people literally have to, move out in the middle of nowhere, get off the grid. They have to have basically these like little boxes or cover their phones or whatever with tinfoil. They're so sensitive that it's like harmful to live in the modern age, with technology. So this thought that pops in my head was, what if those people, now in the modern age, where it's a negative thing to be ultra sensitive to this stuff, what if those are the people that back in the day were the people that were sensitive enough to be able to feel these earth energies and ley lines and window areas? Like, what if those are the same people?
Yeah.
I just think that's a fascinating idea.
You mean like maybe they're like genetically related to these people, or they just have the same ability?
Well, I think if just looking at it as like these people, okay, so say it is kind of like the Force. Say they're overly sensitive, in the modern world, surrounded by radio waves and Wi-Fi and signals and stuff. It's like a detriment to them. It hurts them.
Maybe that's why it hurts them, because they're that sensitive to these energies.
That's what I'm saying.
I love it, dude. I love it.
Yeah, man.
That's
so
cool.
So what if these people nowadays who are just overly sensitive and in pain all the time, those would be the same people that would be your shamans and your priests that would lead your tribes and set up places in these places of power or whatever, because they could feel it. They were sensitive enough to feel it.
Dude.
Pretty cool.
I love that. Now, dude, I promised listener this was unplanned. And Tyler, I had this article that I was not even going to bring up today, dude. But it's like,
synchronicity.
It is, man.
Synchronicity abounds.
It does abound because, like I said, dude, you literally, you laid this up perfectly. Okay, so because of what you just said, this article, the headline reads, "I can speak to aliens after visiting in the ancient pyramid."
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding, dude. Using their secret language, I am bringing a message for all mankind. Okay, Listen to this. A woman has claimed she can communicate with aliens after visiting an ancient pyramid and says she has a message for mankind. The bizarre claim was made by Mafi Walker, who's 45, who says she speaks a secret alien language after a recent trip to the ancient to the ancient Teotihuacan. I don't know how to say it right.
I think
to the ancient pyramids outside of Mexico City.
Yeah.
The Colombian TikToker, who has posted a video explaining that while she was at the site, aliens gifted her with the ability to communicate with them, Since then, she has shared a series of clips of herself standing outside various locations, speaking the, quote, secret language. The woman can be seen speaking a mixture of gibberish, Spanish, and English. Boy, dude. I love that the author just doesn't even hold back. The woman can be seen, speaking a mixture of gibberish, Spanish, and English, but she has never explained why she films these videos. One of her followers commented, "The aliens, well, we didn't say that. That's how the gossip starts." Mm-hmm. So another one said, "I already realized that the aliens are very loving. They love each other and they love us. Taking that out, so boring." Mm-hmm. One of the other comments on the video says, "I tried to repeat what he said and ended up summoning 3 demons." Jeez. 2 things wrong with that. One, they called the lady a he, and also 3 demons. Okay.
Yeah, I was confused. I was like, didn't you say she?
The 45-year-old also claims to be a medium for the message of the extraterrestrials are trying to send to the human race.
It's so easy to just, especially
I know.
The new agey stuff. It's so easy to like put that down. But at the end of the day, it's like, why wouldn't those people be the ones?
Yeah, here's where it starts to get a little bit on the sketch. She said, the aliens want to contact humans because they feel immense love. The woman also claims she has managed to enter other dimensions and says that her body generates vibrations through a special frequency that she emits, and that's how she's able to connect with the aliens. She also says that she works as a medium and offers sessions for $75 per person. So there may be a monetary, I'm just saying, I had this like on the back burner for just to bring up at some point because, you know, it's new, it's in the news. Mm-hmm. And when you started talking about, you know, the ley lines and the ancient temples and people being sensitive, it's like, holy crap.
No, it's right on.
Yeah.
No, it's hard to like, so especially if, I mean, which I'm sure most of our listeners are people who have lived through the 90s and you know, it's like such the height of like the new age movement. And it's like, you always hear this like, oh, you've got to raise your vibrations. And it's like, yes, I agree with you. We're, you know, vibrating and like, we're like, I get all that as far as like the, you know, physiology and the molecules and atoms and all that stuff. But it's just, especially you have all that like then associated with, she also gives medium readings for $70. It's like,
that's when it starts to get a little bit, well, you know.
But, I mean, we got to make our money somehow. I get it, but
yeah, true.
You know,
I don't know. And you know, like a lot of that stuff, you know, I'll say like there's several different categories of folks, you know, the absolute like skeptic about anything, you know, whether it's even like religious ideas. They're just like, nope, boom, okay? Especially with this kind of like UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot. I get it, man. I understand. Then there's folks that are like kind of like in the middle of it all, which is sort of like, look, it's interesting to hear about, it's interesting to think about, but I don't know what I think, you know? And then there's like firm believers that are like, no, because how else can you explain it? And again, I get that. And then there's people that are just like, I believe everything, you know? Right. It doesn't really matter. And so I think in that sort of spectrum of belief level, I'm sort of I would categorize myself as somebody that just loves to read about it, to think about it, to enjoy the ideas. And who knows, right? I mean, at the end of the day, who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, you know, as a longtime fan of all this stuff, it is interesting to me to like look back on my sort of personal journey or history of like, you know, what I believe these things were. I feel like, you know, and I guess this is somewhat of a common quote, but I feel like the older you get, the more you realize like the less that you truly know, you know? I mean, I feel like in the 90s at the height of like X-Files and when all this was like hitting like mainstream, you know, the public zeitgeist, I was 1,000% convinced that maybe a little bit of the stuff is sort of government reverse engineering, you know, Bob Lazar, Area 51, that kind of thing. But the majority of it is 100%, space aliens from other galaxies and this and that. And it is funny that now it's completely different. Now it's, more of like, interdimensionals or ultra-dimensionals, as Jacques Vallée would say. And it's this like tie-in with these like accounts and beings that happened like long before we were ever here, in the modern age. So,
and I gotta say, man, like before I read that book, you could have told me that. I would have been like, yeah, dude, whatever.
Right.
So, like, if you're listening to what Tyler just said and you're thinking the same thing that I just described, I really encourage you to get Jacques Vallée's book, Passport to Magonia, because, honestly, the first half of the book is him detailing and explaining these and presenting the information without any sort of
bias.
Certainly without any bias, other than just like, hey, folks, isn't this interesting? Read this information of these accounts, because and I think a lot of people get disappointed by the fact that the book sort of ends and he hasn't given you his thesis,
Right.
And then the last half of the book is just hundreds and hundreds of pages of just dates, location, and like a small mini description of these things, and
which is awesome.
It's like 100 years worth of stuff, man.
Yeah, also every single time we bring up Jacques Vallée, I kind of feel bad because he's continued writing.
Yeah, I know.
And there's so many new books of his that I haven't.
Yeah,
we haven't.
There's like
read.
A trilogy too that like it's in my Amazon cart right
the
now.
Magonia
No joke.
Thing.
It might be, dude. I don't know. I need to.
Because there's another. He has another like. It's not Passport to Magonia, but it's something tied in with the.
Yeah, and I've been meaning to dive in, but guys, there's so many books.
Yeah, I know. Well, I have a little story. It's nothing too crazy, but boy, since we're
do we need to get into it? Should we save it?
We definitely need to get into it. It's pretty short, but I think it's going to add an even more interesting sort of bizarre take on.
Yeah, but hold on. Gosh, dude, I completely forgot to tell you what my idea about the windows are real quick.
Oh, right.
Okay. So real quick.
You interrupted me and then I...
Yeah. So now we're even. Okay. It's not really like a theory. It's just a thought. Something that popped in my head while you were talking about it. Okay. There's an issue I have with a lot of Star Wars movies. One of them is that, well, I'll say as a kid, I had an issue because I couldn't understand, like, okay, they're going to Tatooine, right? Well, that's an entire planet, dude.
Right.
So how do they know where Mos Eisley is and like all these places when, it's just a humongous planet? What else is going on that planet, So I thought about like, okay, well, they have the coordinates to those locations, right? And so like these windows would be sort of like, hey, we know these coordinates and we know how to get to Earth and be there, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's like a waypoint where they can go, and that's why potentially it just occurs. There's a lot of occurrences in that or those locations, and then gradually over time they kind of spread out, or they just travel within the planet, just in our own atmosphere, and that's why people see them in a lot of different places. Anyway.
Well, no. That is actually one of the things that bothered me about Obi-Wan. And I'm not giving anything away, but the Inquisitors, they're operating, through the dark side of the Force. So why would they have not been able to like pick up on this Obi-Wan in hiding when he was
okay, dude, I'm so glad you asked
20
that
feet away.
Ann and I just had this conversation last night. Okay. She was listening to something, and like one guy was saying, like, had a problem with the fact that, like, come on, man, you're telling me that just because he hasn't used the Force in like 10 years, he's forgotten it all?
Yep.
Dude, he has buried that Force sensitivity and like just being able to tap into it so deep so that he can hide from people that are looking for anybody that's Force sensitive, because essentially they're being like exterminated, right?
He hid his light under a bushel.
Yes. Okay. So that explains that. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of get what you're saying.
You have to, dude. Otherwise, like, because by the time he started using it, then she would be like, huh? I mean, you have to be, like, really powerful to be able to, like, sense someone across a galaxy.
I mean, when they're in the town and he's, like, 15 feet away.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
That's where I'm like, come on.
Yeah, especially when Vader lands.
Yeah.
Oops. Dang it.
Which is pretty amazing, by the way. But yeah, exactly. That's yeah.
It doesn't make sense, but sometimes like
you got to suspend
you got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, look, man. You better get
Well, when we return,
we will return after these messages.
There's something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no man.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler. And you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now, back to our show.
On July 12th, 1984, Russian cosmonauts aboard the Soviet space station Salyut 7 were on day 155 of their mission. This was also the day that the group reported strange lights and beings, according to Commander Oleg Atkov and cosmonauts Vladimir Solovyov and Leonid Kizim. The space station was completely bathed in a mesmerizing orange light. It appeared to enter from outside the space station and bled through an absolutely opaque wall. For a short period of time, the orange light was so bright that it blinded the crew. When their vision returned, each one looked out the portholes for the source of light. Looking specifically for a possible explosion, they knew the Salyut 7 had suffered previous fires, but what the crew saw was far more incomprehensible than the orange light. All of the cosmonauts reported seeing the faces of 7 angels who were hovering just outside the space station. They told ground control that they were humanoid in appearance. Faces and bodies both looked human, but they had misty wings and halos. These beings kept pace with the space station for about 10 minutes before vanishing. On day 167, the crew would then be joined by another team of 3 cosmonauts from the Soyuz T-12 spacecraft. Svetlana Savitskaya, Igor Volk, and Vladimir Zanebokov. Shortly after joining them, the Salyut 7 was once again bathed in a warm orange light. Then, like clockwork, they immediately looked out the portholes and once again were joined by these angelic beings. They were reportedly the size of an airliner, according to cosmonauts. The incident was deemed top secret by the old Soviet Union, and the crew was cautioned not to speak of the event publicly. All of the cosmonauts reported seeing a smiling angel. While some may dismiss the incident as fatigue due to an extended stay in space, there was more than one crew that saw the beings. After the strange incident occurred, the crew went on to stay on the vessel for a record-breaking 237 days before abandoning it. Although there is no conclusive evidence to sustain the case, the Salyut 7 incident was recorded as a collective hallucination. So in the files, it's just
here we go.
Collective hallucination. Yeah. In fact, there were 2 identical collective hallucinations at 2 different times with different crews. Upon returning to Earth, each of the cosmonauts underwent intense and prolonged examinations, both physical and mental in nature, and all passed these exams and procedures convincingly. In light, nothing indicates or proves that what they saw was a hallucination, and there was no suggestion or reason to suggest that the incident was a collective lie of the Soviets. However, the accounts of the cosmonauts and the incident itself came largely from the reports and research released by the Russian government. And although the incident reached international news, there was no major repercussion, and the incident was soon forgotten.
Man.
Yeah, and so this was actually put out by the Washington Post back in the 80s.
Okay, in the 80s.
Yeah, so this was in July 12th of 1984 is when the first one happened.
Now, dude, this is amazing. A couple reasons why. As Cold War kids ourselves, there's always been this fascination of USA versus, Russia. And,
Ruskies.
And Ruskies.
Love it.
And cosmonauts. I mean, heck, we had a song called Cosmonaut.
Yeah. Probably wouldn't be as popular nowadays.
Not nowadays. Thanks, Vlad. Anyways, I hate, out of all of the explanations that get put on a label and slapped on top of these case files, the one I hate the most, truly, because like ball lightning, swamp gas and stuff, those are interesting phenomenons anyway that do exist.
Right.
But the one that makes me furious, dude, is like I'm supposed to believe that this group of astronauts, all suffering from fatigue, just happened to hallucinate the same thing. I mean, dude, I had some druggy friends in high school, okay?
Yeah.
And none of them hallucinated the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and also, on the flip side of that, the mass hallucination explanation, I think there's no greater thing that explains the existence of a simulated reality than that.
Well, that's true, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
so
it's like,
what you're saying is like, if you're going to go down the road of, okay, it was a mass hallucination.
You got to
It's like an if-then statement. If there's such thing as mass hallucinations, then we're in a simulation.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing as like when people have like their they take like ayahuasca and they have the ceremonies or like DMT or any of that stuff. These people for centuries have claimed to see these exact same. Terrence McKenna calls them like the clockwork elves or machine elves, and they all explain
machine elves.
You've never heard of this?
No.
Joe Rogan.
That sounds amazing.
He's seeing the same thing too, which is like all these people see this exact same thing, which again is really crazy. Especially,
should we put up a poll, dude, to our campers listening to Camp Rad Strangeness here? Should Tyler and Woody go take ayahuasca?
I think so.
No,
although I'm actually terrified of it.
I am too, man. Now let me ask you a different question. Let me pose it a different way because I think it's illegal, right? If it was not an illegal thing, would it be something that you? For me, dude, you already know this answer. I think I'm not messing with that at all.
Well,
although
I would have at a time, but I was given a.
Oh God!
No. Listen, I suffer really bad from these migraines, and I was given what they call I was sent to the emergency room because I had a migraine that was so bad I thought I was going to die, and there was a point before I'm on injections now, so I take a shot every month, and it totally helps. But up until that point, actually, I was on this medication like when it was still in like experimental rounds or whatever. I was getting 2 to 3 per week, and it was really awful, really miserable time. But anyway, I went to the emergency room, and they gave me what they call a migraine cocktail, which is several medications, but one of the medications is called Reglan. And I tell this for all you people out there, never, ever, ever take this medication. I don't care if we get taken down by Big Pharma. This medication is the devil. And the reason I say this is I've never dealt with anxiety. I've never once had a panic attack. I've never had any of these things. And the second they gave this to me, my heart rate went through the roof, and they actually I was like almost to the point of like coding, to where they had to rush over, give me a shot to bring down my vitals because I was like probably going to have like a heart attack. It was really bad. It was really, really bad. And so anyway, after that, even until now, I now deal with this like a panic disorder kind of thing that like it'll just come out of nowhere. I know I've told you a case where I was at Disneyland and with my family, everything was awesome. No, not a worry, to be found. And out of nowhere, I felt like I was going to die. And I had to take 3 buses, a tram just to get out of the park. And then I took 2 Ubers, went to 2 different urgent cares. It was like the scariest 12 hours of my life by myself in Orlando, Florida. But anyway, in saying all that, sorry to ramble, in saying all that, I now have a whole new sort of level of caution or fear for like, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, well, if you just do it one time, it's nothing.
Yeah, dude. The thing is, like, it affects everything, including medications, dude, affect people in so many different ways. Like, us being human, you know, I mean, dude, there's people in my family who, you know, they don't even take, like, Tylenol.
Right, yeah.
Because, like, it just makes them feel crazy. So, like, yeah, man, I'm there with you. Also, just, it's almost like, I just want to, that's just, I don't know, man. That stuff kind of freaks me out. I mean, I don't know. I wish there was some way to, like, just digitally. Yeah, dude. Like, let somebody else do it, and let me just see what's going on. Because a mechanical, what was it? Machine elf?
Yeah, so they're called like machine elves or clockwork elves.
Say no more.
Well, no, listen to this. So this is another fascinating thing. So a common thing that people see are these like hexagram patterns or like diamond patterns. And what's crazy is if you start looking into some of these accounts, and we're talking people that aren't into any of this stuff. We're talking to like total jocks who just happen to be in Peru, and we're like, let's get up and do an ayahuasca ceremony. They have the same accounts as these other people who are into, like, you know, opening up your third eye and Kundalini and all this stuff. And so they talk about the same thing, and a lot of these characters look like your typical jesters. They have these diamond patterns and the Harlequin, and then, you know, it creates a whole other feedback loop into what we love on the show.
Man, it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I think that what an amazing Camp Rad Strangeness segment, dude. I mean, Mike, again, thank you, man. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I mean, I kind of want to, like, find out a couple other things. Like, did you tell your wife about it whenever she woke up from her nap? Or, like, when you got done kind of running out to the wood or the tree line and saw them disappear for the final time? I mean, you mentioned that you weren't scared at all, but were you excited enough to, like, go and wake your wife up?
Well, Buddy talks about, which is funny. He mentioned something that is exactly what my buddy Jesse and I, when we saw a UFO way back in the 4th grade, he said, I didn't want to run in to get my phone because I had a feeling that if I came back outside, it would be gone.
It was going to be gone,
Yeah. And so a lot of people kind of say that same sort of thing. And what's funny is there is a lot of people also have these accounts of, it's like a sentience. It's like there's something in, even me with my, like, orb story. And again, I was going to put it in this episode, but I think we're going to have a full episode on orbs, I promise. And I'll talk about it. But there's a level of, like, quote unquote, the other, as Timothy Renner has affectionately called it, where anything sort of paranormal, it's like there's something a lot of times in these accounts, and I don't know if this is particularly like what Mike was talking about, but there is a level of it. These things, this UFO, this anomalous light, this Bigfoot, this alien, whatever, they know when we're looking at them. And then they, you know, blip out of existence, or they fly off, or whatever. But that's such a common thing. I would also like to say for Mike that, man, you are so lucky for being able to see this. And not only just seeing a UFO in general, but you were able to see some of the weird, like, geometric, like...
shape changing, color changing. There was more than one of them, too.
That stuff is amazing, man.
Dude, unreal.
I wonder if... the first thing I thought of, too, is, like, there's so many cases where, like you talked about, Woody, up at the top, where these people see these things at night. I think the Phoenix Lights case had a lot of these where... You know, you'll see like one light and then it would like split off into two. I wonder if that's basically what Mike was seeing in the daytime. He was seeing like the visual of like what's actually happening.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, no.
So
I mean,
cool.
Again, man, I was just fascinated by the timing of it, you know, in terms of the time of day. And I mean, I wonder too if it's like a situation that as you're experiencing it, your mind is kind of like, that can't be that. You know what I mean? And then as it kind of comes back to you later, you're like, oh my gosh, man. So I'd be interested to kind of hear like sort of the other parts of the story, potentially like, what did your wife think about it? Was she just like what my wife would do, which would be like, it was probably just an airplane.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is my wife and I, you know, I was talking about calling into MUFON and they sent an investigator out. we actually saw a UFO, and it was as the sun was going down. It was kind of in the daytime. But the weirdest thing is, like, she literally saw the exact same thing that I did. And I don't know, within a couple weeks, it was like already in her mind, she was like, I don't know, it's probably like a drone. It's probably like an airplane. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, we were both like,
you guys got abducted. She's got an implant in her eyeball. That's it.
Exactly. Well, cool. Well, what a great episode. Like you said, I'm psyched to just keep going down this rabbit trail. It's going to be a badass summer, and we're glad you're with us to join us in the ride. If you want to find us, head on over to Instagram. You know, we love the conversation. Drop us a line in the comments. If you want to talk to us about maybe an account you've had, an urban legend in your area, maybe you got abducted, you know, shoot us a DM, or if it's more of a long form type essay situation, head on over to thatwouldberadpod@gmail.com.
By the way, we're happy to change names and make it and keep it anonymous, but
yeah, right.
If you want us to use your name and or location in the episode, we will.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we love it all. We're sort of collectors at this point, and the more the merrier. So feel free. Also, buy us a coffee. And there's new merch in the Linktree, that Camp Rad Strangeness merch in the Linktree that we're pretty excited about. Yeah, like we always say, go tell a single friend about the show. It seems like a really trivial, small thing, but if every one of you listening just went out and told a friend, told your UPS driver, told your pilot on your airplane, whatever. Like Woody, he had several butlers when he was younger.
Come on.
You know, tell your butler.
Not true.
Spread the word. Also, go and give us a 5-star rating on, I believe, Spotify. You can do it now. Apple Podcast.
Leave us a review. Tell other people why you like the show.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
It all helps to spread the word, and we can't thank you enough. So, yeah. You got anything else, Woody?
I think that's it, man. Other than if you guys want to go down to the waterfront, make sure you take your swim test before 8 p.m. tomorrow. We're going to be getting in the canoes. We're going to be, paddling out, going to the blob. Do you remember the blob, dude?
I've never been able to do it.
Are you kidding me?
I've always wanted to.
Well, we're going to have to figure that out.
Yeah. I bungee jumped several times, but
oof, I would never do it.
I would never do it now, but so we love you. We appreciate you. And as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes. clouds in a time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead before you became a ghost. You always said our future would be a parade of flowers, but now all that's left is
I am eating a Nature Valley peanut butter dark chocolate protein bar.
I think those are the ones that got recalled, but okay.
Oh, shoot. I mean, it could have been. I got these at like the dollar store.
Oh, yeah, dude. Alpha Brain.
Oh, and I'm also drinking a Rain Total Body Fuel white gummy bear flavored energy drink because I'm out of my sugar-free Red Bull.
That sounds disgusting.
It's actually not bad. My buddy Isaac sent them to me, and it's pretty good, but boy, they're sweet.
Hey, Isaac, this is your friend Woody speaking. I think it's time to lay off the energy drinks, Isaac.
Well, he sends me like these like sort of weird flavors, and like, hey, I'm all for it. I love it. I appreciate it, Isaac. Thank you.
And by the way, I don't know how deep he's gonna kind of realize I went with that baseball audio that I put in there. It's from May 2009. The audio that I used for his whenever I put in, when he's like, what's a little bit of the Boston Red Sox, and you just hear, she took these on a long way. That's from a game, May of 2009.
That's his date?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, dude, I get crazy with it.
Dude, what about the synchronicity?
Dude, it's just like synchronicity after synchronicity after synchronicity.
Yeah.
I love the fact that first off, man, like no joke, the fact that, you know, I think potentially people can kind of just think of it as trivial, but like it does blow my mind when people like send their own voice, number one, tell their story, and are just like, nah, man, you can say my name, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's super cool.
It is super cool. I mean, especially if, you know, like Mike said, especially if it's like, I've barely told anybody, or I've never told anybody, but it's like you're able to trust us enough to put it on a show. That's just pretty amazing.
I mean, can I say, like, if I was going to get abducted, is it bad to say, like, I would want it to be like him, they'd just be like hot?
I mean, you've been sort of looking forward to like the probe thing for a long time.
No, but what I'm saying is, like, you know, like Jacques Vallée talked about those things coming out for breeding purposes.
Man, this is going great, by the way.
Are you being sarcastic?
No, I'm being dead serious.
I don't like your tone from the start.
No, it sounds great. It sounds fantastic. So when I come out, I'm just going to go straight into reading this thing, okay? And then I want to hear your reaction too, so, you know.
Wow.
In July 1980, in July 12th, on July, wow.
All right, man,
That's
I gotta
not
go.
going to make the cut.